Welcome to the Plague Hive. The most recent set, The Hunted, gave us not one but two new assassins playable in Classic Constructed, Arachne Marionette and Arachne Slip through the cracks. I don't want to say this every single time, so I'm just going to refer to them as Slippy from now on, because I think if we do Arachne Slip through the cracks every single time, this video is going to be even longer than it probably will already be, so let's just not do that. With me today is Jasin, who took his Slip through the cracks deck to the semifinals in the recent Calling Christchurch. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining me today.
No worries. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so let's start maybe with the first question, right? Like, let's just get that out of the gate. Why Slippy? Like, why did you decide to bring this hero over another hero, like specifically over another assassin, right? So let's compare this maybe to like Marionette and Nu, which I think are like the main, I want to say, contenders for assassins to run at events at the moment.
So I guess the first reason was we wanted to play, like me and my two friends, Isaac and Quill, wanted to play a rogue deck.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to play something that people kind of hadn't tested against, that just come out, likely to make mistakes against it, and also still had some pretty good matchups, which I think the Slippy deck does. And so I think that was a good choice for that reason. You know, we had way more reps on the deck than anyone else had reps into it, so you know, we definitely got some points there. So that was probably the first reason. I'm just trying to get a bit of additional points. There's a lot of good players in Christchurch. A lot of good people flew over as well. So it was a pretty high quality field, I reckon, in my opinion. And then I guess the second reason is the effect is very powerful, giving yourself unconditional go again. It just completely changes the way some cards work and how good they are. Like Kiss of Death, for example, you got unconditional go again. You don't have to worry about boots or hitting with Mario. It's just always on. So your Toxicity, Kiss of Death is actually a real combo now. You can basically just do it off anything, anytime. So that's one other reason. The unconditional go again is also really good into Enigma. So I think this is probably the best assassin to play into Enigma for that reason. It's just got more unconditional go again. It can go wider, way easier, and makes life way more awkward for them.
Right, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Because, like, you don't have to rely on any kind of external factors. You just go, okay, here's my stuff. It has go again. There's nothing you can do about it. You know, deal with it, basically, right? So, okay, I get that.
Yeah, like if you play pick the pieces into a whole bunch of auras, like, what are they going to do? They can try and block it, and then you just attack with another stealth, and then you buff your next stealth.
Yeah.
It's just because it's unconditional. There's just so many awkward things for them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right. Let's just switch the view over real quick to see the actual list in question. So obviously the link to this list will be down in the description of the video, so you can check it out for yourself if you want to. And let's just, this is the hero ability, right? Jasin already mentioned it. Very straightforward. First attack with stealth each turn gets go again. So whatever you play, your infect, your backstat, auto desire, whatever, the first thing you play has go again, basically. So one main thing or one key thing to note with this effect is symmetrical, so it also applies to your opponent, which is relevant if you're playing against another assassin that has stealth attacks, which is basically all of them at the moment. And this is also the key thing that differentiates Slippy from Arachne's Solitary Confinement, which is the Blitz version of this hero, essentially, which came out in Outsider, so over a year ago. Have you actually played any Solitary Confinement in Blitz before? And did that influence like your deck building choices? Or is this just you saw this hero ability, you went like, okay, I want to jam this in CC, let's try to make it work?
No, I definitely have played it a few times. It was in some ways a little bit of the thinking behind the deck. We kind of we started with trying to bring Solitary Confinement into Classic Constructed. I mean, there's obviously way more powerful different things going on with Kiss of Death and Toxicity and stuff like that. But yeah, it sort of was a bit of the basis. I mean, that deck was always quite red heavy. This deck's quite red heavy, so that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Yeah, like red heavy, you got 3 blues in the main board. That is, I think, the reddest list I've ever seen, actually. I mean, there's a couple more in the sideboard, right? So this is not like
Yeah.
you don't only always run these, but that's very red heavy, definitely. I think I've seen draw my lists with more blues than this back in the day. So,
There's quite a lot of yellows in it, and the
yeah.
yellows are pretty good. So it's quite an interesting feature of the deck, I think.
Hmm.
You don't pitch a lot. NC is the main thing you pitch for. You don't need yellow for that anyway, so
Yeah,
what
that's
I need blue
true.
for.
Like if you don't need the floating resource for anything, like you might as well just run yellows, right? And like Flesh and Blood has this thing where a lot of power cards are just yellow. Like a lot of these really signature power cards, like Blood Rush Bellows, Codex of Frailty, right? Like you take up the mantle, basically. A lot of these
Yeah.
these cards where you think about a deck and the most powerful thing it can do, and a lot of the time that thing is going to involve a yellow card for a lot of decks, like not just Assassin. This just goes through all of the classes, right? Art of War, then like obviously Prism has a lot of yellows, but like Herald of Erudition, right? That's a big one. That's also yellow. So a lot of decks have these like really good, powerful cards that are yellows, and then if you construct your pitch base in a way that you don't really need 3 resources on any given turn, having yellows is pretty good. Yeah. Okay, I can see that. All right. So the hero ability obviously informs some of the deck building choices. You want a lot of attacks with stealth, so you can benefit from that go again. That's kind of like self-explanatory, I think. Let's go over the equipment choices real quick. So we got flick knives. I think this is, I mean, it's too good to pass on, right? You can enable marked with the Hunter's Clave, but I think the main thing you're running this for is to really make the Toxicity Kiss of Death combo like as punishing as
Yeah.
possible.
I think that Flick Knives is just the best equipment right now for this deck. You wouldn't
Yeah,
run anything else.
yeah. Like, I mean, I don't think any other assassin has anything else they can run except for Nu, just because she has
Yeah.
the wave, which is really good. But Flick Knives is just kind of the default, and unfortunately, it's very expensive right now. So if you got yours during Outsiders when it was like a €20 or like $20 card, good on you. If you want to pick up this deck right now, unfortunately, this is a little bit pricey, but I think I don't think there's like a budget replacement for this. Like in theory, you can run the danger digits, which does the same thing once per game if you wanted to go for like a really budget version, but I don't think this is replaceable, right?
It's probably the only one card that's completely irreplaceable. And
Mm.
then maybe, you can even replace the Hunter's Claves actually. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably the one thing that's
Hmm.
irreplaceable.
Okay, makes sense. And then Tunic. Normally, I don't really talk about Tunic because it's Tunic. It's good. We've known that for like 5 years now, right? But I think in specifically like these aggressive assassin decks, there's now an actual contender in the form of like Blood Splattered Vest. Um,
Hmm.
why'd you go for Tunic over Blood Splattered Vest? Is it just because you don't really dagger that much, and then it's hard to gain value from
Yeah.
the vest?
Yeah, I mean it's mostly because you you want to run Spike with Blood Rock. So
Hmm.
Spike with Blood Rock also works with Kiss of Death.
Right.
And the only way you can really get that to work is to pitch, which we don't have much of anyway.
Hmm.
Or if you try and blood splat vest it, you kind of have to flick a dagger, which means you can't flick the Kiss of Death. So it just doesn't really work
Hmm.
um, with Spike with Blood Rock
Yeah.
is the main reason. But you can obviously play the Kiss of Death, tunic a Spike with Blood Rot, and then play another stealth and
Right.
flick the Kiss of Death. So that's
Okay.
kind of the main reason why it's better.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. Have you ever tried running Redback, Redback Shroud? Because I know in
We did
Blitz,
think
yeah,
about that. Yeah. Yeah, we did think about that. We didn't actually test it in the end. We did think about it a few times. It could actually be like pretty good.
hmm
We definitely didn't try it though. So you could definitely consider that in some
okay,
decks. I think the only reason I would say maybe not is you also do sometimes you want to pitch a blue
hmm
and Codex CNC as well, which you can't really
right,
do off that too on those
yeah,
grindy games. I think in some games though, yeah, I could definitely see it being being good. It's a react as well,
Yeah.
so it kind of like helps a bit with the reaction count for
Yeah, with
your
Bonds of
bonds they
Agony
need
or
to.
something, yeah. I can see that
Yeah,
being like
yeah,
a sideboard choice for like really aggressive matchups where you just don't expect the game to go long enough to get value from Tunic. I think this is the main reason why Redback Shroud is being played in Blitz in solitary confinement, just because you're like, okay, game's not gonna go more than like, I don't know, 3 or 4 turns anyway, so I'm only ever gonna get a single Tunic resource. Might as well run, the card that does the same but more flexible. So I can
yeah,
see that
exactly.
being like a sideboard choice, maybe. Okay, then we got Hunter's Clave. Two of them, I think this just makes sense because you do have some mark synergies in the deck. Mostly Take Up the Mantle and Mark of the Black Widow. Um, did you ever test any other daggers, or was this just okay? We just need two Hunter's Claves because they do the most for the deck.
So for a while, yeah, we were on like one Hunter's Clave, one Spider's Bite, just to
Mm-hmm.
test that. But it sort of didn't really. You got a little bit of value out of the Spider's Bite, but not really enough to justify it. And then the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you had to kind of run push the point and some other stuff in the deck
Mm-hmm.
made it a little bit awkward
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't really have too many ways to get Hunter's Clave back. And Take Up the Mantle is just like, yeah, it's just such a good card.
Yeah,
Um, really
it's
want
really.
to have it on as much as possible. You could potentially play Mark of the Huntsman as well as a cheap version of
Mm-hmm.
Hunter's Clave. Maybe even if you had one Hunter's Clave, one Mark of the Huntsman, there's maybe some situations where it's as good, but it's like maybe it comes in for two instead of one, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think double Hunter's Clave we found was just more consistent. So
Okay, yeah, makes sense in terms of like just having it on the board whenever you need it, and
yeah,
okay, makes sense just for consistency's sake, yeah. Okay, then we got Mask of Deceit. Obviously, this is an Arachne, so you can run this card. I would imagine like the other option for this would be something like, I don't know, Crown of Providence. To
yep.
just get around like some Arsenal hate a little bit more. Um, how often does this line up the way you want it to? Because I imagine normally you have to sort of like plan for this to happen, right? You have like you have like a good Arsenal card, and then you end your turn by flicking a Hunter's Clave at the opponent to make sure they're marked, and then you can block with this and switch into like a Black Widow, for example, just to double up on like the Kiss of Death disruption stuff or something like that. Or do you often run this? Because like one other thing you can do this or you can use this for is in the Assassin Mirror. You can just block with this to deny your opponent getting go again on their first stealth attack. Was this like the main idea behind this, and you don't really care about being marked? You just go like, okay, maybe I roll into something good, and I get to turn off your go again. How do you mostly utilize this in like your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the matchup and the game situation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes against some matchups, like Syndra in particular, where you just need to block breakpoints for masking momentum, you just kind of block with it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you block with it and you get a six and you get the you get your inertia trap as well, so it's kind of just
Mm-hmm.
like a five block, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But then other times you just use the attack or you don't really come back with much and it's irrelevant. And then there's the other situations where you've flicked previously and they're still marked, and then you get to block with this and
Yeah.
you know use number one and kind of destroy them with something. It's
Yeah.
kind of there's all sorts of situations it comes up with. I've always found it's been better than worse in pretty much every situation. I think it's better than Crown of Providence. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Crown of Providence is more consistent in some matchups, but
Mm-hmm.
I still like um the high roll that you can get out of Mask of the
Mm-hmm.
Seed. We did actually test in one scenario, in a couple of scenarios, Arcanite Skullcat, just for
Okay.
that extra breakpoint block in some matchups. But I think we just decided on Mask of the Seed. There's certainly other options though.
Okay. Right. So because Slippy is one of those heroes that starts with like less than 40 life total, so that automatically makes all of these cards like Arcanite Skullcap that trigger off of having a lower life than your opponent kind of like a little bit more easy to run and like more
Yeah,
of, I don't know, little more synergistic. Okay, I get that. Yeah. So if you wanted to go for like maximum defense on your equipment, you would run Crown of Providence, but like not Crown of
yeah,
Providence, like Arcanite Skullcap, but in
yeah.
terms of like overall just extra potential to the deck, Mask of Deceit is the way to go, in your opinion. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think so.
and then we
I
got
think you could maybe Sideboard the Skull Cap, but
yeah. Okay, sure. I mean, fortunately, this card is not very expensive. Like, it was pretty expensive when the set released, but it's been steadily dropping, and I think it's sitting like $30, $40, something like this at the moment. So, this is not breaking the bank for the deck. If you don't have this card and want to pick it up, it's not super expensive. Like, I'd be more worried about Flick Knives and the Double Hunter's Clave at the moment, in terms of like price. And then we got Snapdragon Scalers as the last piece of equipment, and I gotta say, this was like slightly surprising to me. I want to say that this is the main board card over like black text, and I know you got black text in the side here, so we can talk about that a little bit later. But in Marionette, I think this makes total sense, just because Marionette can't guarantee the go again, and sometimes you need the guaranteed go again to have a turn, right, to do something. So is this just for going like extra wide, so you can go like stealth into something when you need to?
So it is for that sometimes. Sometimes it's actually for when you use your mask as well, and you want
Okay.
to guarantee go again. Like if
Mhm.
you have Snapdragon Scalers up, you've masked and you get like 1, 2, or 3,
Mhm.
and then you just play Bonds of Agony. They're just in a world of hurt. It's
Right.
just so
Okay.
hard for them to do what to do. So it's really good in that scenario. And in some matchups, like against the Enigma, you maybe just want to go wider to try and clear
Mhm.
a Mirai,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
you just need to do it. So it's situational.
Mhm.
Should that be main board or should the other one be main board? It does really depend. But there's actually there's quite a few decks out there that aren't like doing on hit breakpoints. Like Viscerai, for example, is
Right.
kind of just a 3 go again deck, right?
Mhm.
It's not that not as important to have the breakpoint against a deck like that.
Yeah. Okay.
As it
Makes
is some
sense.
other
And
classes.
then
Yeah.
versus something like Aurora or like Dash.io, you would rather run black text because you have to sometimes like block their full power attacks. Okay.
Yeah, and particularly Syndra as well, where like
Right.
they're all really red decks as well. So you
Yeah.
often you can even get them back from leaving the witnesses, which we've done in some matchups,
Okay.
which is pretty awesome when that happens. Yeah,
Right, yeah, because you sometimes just hit them with this and they don't block it, and you get like 1 or 2 silver off of it. Okay, sure, yeah. Like I like having some form of silver outlet in the deck because like sometimes with new, you just end up in these situations where you have like 2 or 3 silver and you don't really have anything to do with them because new runs like zero
yeah,
of the silver interactions. Like you have occasionally you have these like turns where you crack a silver, crack a silver, crack a silver, levels of enlightenment with all modes.
yeah.
That's pretty cool. Like that's a niche little interaction that you have in new, but mostly you just sit on that silver and never really get to utilize it. So having a way to like actually do something with the silver in the aggro matchups is pretty cool. Like I can see that. Okay, cool. And then in terms of the rest of the equipment, we got AB3 here. So you are respecting Kano.
Yep.
Is this like because you're running a deck with like 3 blues main board, you can go up to like I guess 10 if you really wanted to. Is this more about the spell void or more about the AB into
I think it's
Kano?
just they both help, right? On the big
Mm-hmm.
turn, you get to block 4 off the first at the wildfire and still have Arcane Barrier up
Mm-hmm.
to like off a blue. So I think it just turns the matchup from 0% into like at the very least 50%, if not favored, because of
Okay.
how much spell void plus AB you have. Like it's just very good.
Mm-hmm.
We felt the Kano matchup was very good for us because they have to be on. We've got to be on such a low life total
Mm-hmm.
for them to actually kill us a lot of the time.
Okay. Cool. That makes sense. Like, and I understand that the choices here. You want to keep flick knives. You don't want to give up a dagger, so you just run these 3, and that makes sense. Like, I would imagine it probably makes your bonds of agony like slightly worse because you have 1 less reaction that you have access to, but
Yeah.
overall it's probably not the end of the day, right? Like, it's not the worst thing. Okay, cool. So that takes care of the equipment. Let's go over the main board here. We have a lot of red stealth attacks, which is, like I
Mhm.
said, naturally what the deck wants to do because of the hero ability, so that makes sense. Um, I think most of these are just kind of like, they're just good, right? You just pick the ones that are good and you run with those. That makes sense. So you got like Mark of the Black Widow, obviously. You have the Mark synergy, so this is a disruptive stealth, pretty good. Art of Desire Body, sometimes a Snatch against like red heavy decks. So it's a Snatch with Go Again that blocks 3. Pretty good. You can't really complain about that. Infect is just above rate, 0 for 5. Very good card. Kiss of Death, obviously. Enables, I think probably Kiss of Death, I want to say at least, is like the reason to play this deck. Would that be like a correct assumption? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the deck that can most reliably do Toxicity to death. You can't really play Toxicity in any other Jasin deck. It's just not reliable enough, right? But whereas this, you draw both the cards, you're basically always doing 6 damage unless they've got a shelter in hand or something like that. So it's very good.
It's pretty good. There's not much they can do about this to play around it. So this is definitely, I think this is, if you saw this interaction and you were like, hey, this is cool, I want to do this, I think this is the deck to play. Because like you can make Toxicity work in Marionette, but it's really not that reliable. Like if the opponent can just block out the Kiss of Death and you have to blow your snaps on it basically to make it work. And here it just works and you can just do it. And then Toxicity, because it's a 2 block and because it only applies to the next attack, it's just it's a very restrictive card in terms of what it works with. Basically, it works with Kiss of Death, and that's kind of it. Like sometimes you can make
you can use
it
with like isolate, maybe backstab. It's just a little bit awkward,
It's awkward, So, and I noticed something that I really liked is like you and I think a lot of other Slippy mains that have been playing the hero for a while have kind of switched over to yellow Toxicity over the red. So I assume this is just because the card is so awkward and it only works with Kiss of Death. If you draw it in any other hand and you can't really get it to Arsenal, you can at least pitch to a dagger, and that's kind of the idea here, right?
I mean, the other thing is, right, if I play it on a Kiss of Death and my Kiss of Death hits, I probably won that game anyway. Right. Just you got an extra 4 value, well 5 actually, if you consider the on hit from Kiss of Death.
Yeah.
Life lost, and then I'm flicking it for 6 more. Like it's just so much damage. I probably won that game anyway. I don't really need the extra 2 life from a red Toxicity. And then a lot of the times when it doesn't, they do block the Kiss of Death. We're only losing 1 point of value from the red versus the yellow to actually gain so much more utility. Being able to pitch it off CNC and all those kinds of things is just really, really valuable. Late game, they're really good too. You can combo with Codex of Frailty, which is pretty cool. So you can just like push them together, which is kind of cool. So there's all sorts of reasons to play a yellow red. I know some people have started playing 6 red. I mean, I haven't. That's probably quite a different playing list. But I can see that being kind of interesting, forcing your opponent to block. But I think you could definitely you could consider running more than the yellows. But I think you start getting hogging up your deck with this random stuff. It gets
I think if you just junky. Like it's too many random 2 blocks that don't work on every hand. Like I think it's doable, but it turns the deck into like more of a high roll deck, right? If you do this. Like where you can just completely like you have 2 Toxicities and a Kiss of Death in hand and a follow-up and your opponent just kind of cries. But then other times you just draw like 2 Toxicities with no Kiss of Death, and then like the red ones don't pitch, they don't block well, you don't really know what to do with them, so it just gets a little bit more awkward. So I get just running the 3, and I think that's plenty in terms of like high roll potential already that you have, right?
You got Spike with Blood Rod as well, which is good too. It does a similar thing. Makes 2 Blood Rods.
Like less damage, but it's overall pretty similar. Like this is basically 8 value, right? If you get to flick Kiss of Death. And Spike with Blood Rod, I think, is 7. Right? It's like 5 because of the pump, and then like +2 extra Blood Rod on the flick. So very similar in terms of numbers. And this one blocks 3, so can definitely
situation as well.
And you can use it on bonds, so it's like a little more flexible in that regard. So you have some stuff there. Okay. So we got, Kiss of Death, like I said, main reason to play the deck, kind of. Like, this allows you to do like really disgusting stuff. Tarantula Toxin on Kiss of Death is also like just wildly above rate. This is like a 0 for 6 if they block the Kiss of Death. So if you have this combo like Toxicity, Kiss of Death, Tarantula Toxin, and any other stealth, your opponent just they have no way to play around it, like basically.
Yeah, I did draw that hand against Nick Butcher on stream, which was pretty funny. So
yeah, I saw that game.
Yeah.
That was really fun to watch. Like generally, like I highly recommend checking out the games that Jasin played on stream. I'll be linking that in the description of the video because every single one of them is a banger. Like I think they're all pretty close and they're really like back and forth. And I think they really showcase what this hero can do. So definitely check out those games. They're highly entertaining.
I don't know if I call the Enigma game that close. I think I ended it on like 35 life, but
yeah, fair.
Other than that,
yeah. Like this, the what was it, like the Azalea match, where I think you you live on like 2 life at the end, and it's basically down to them not top decking a dominated arrow that's like too big for you to handle, and then you just kill them, because they can't pitch into Blood Rot. Like that was pretty sweet.
You're ruining you're doing some spoilers here for people that.
Yeah, fair. Sorry. Like no spoilers. Like don't listen to what I said like 30 seconds ago. Okay. So I think a couple of the other ones, Red Stealth, right, where we're still on that topic. Some of these are like tech choices, right? So like Pick to Pieces, I guess, is here because of Enigma. You could run something else if she wasn't something that you have to consider. Similar, I would assume, for Backstab. Backstab is here because a lot of heroes play D-Reacts because Assassin is like pretty relevant in the meta right now. So against these like heavy D-React decks, right? I'm talking like Jarl, Enigma, Florian, I guess, can also run this. Some versions of Ira. Like there's just a bunch of defensive decks that run like 12 D-Reacts or something. So having Backstab that just says, you can't really use your D-Reacts on this, and then maybe I pump it up with like a Spike with Blood Rot, and it's annoying for you to deal with. And then I have go again into something else. I would assume this is like it's a tech card, right? Like because it doesn't do anything inherently by itself, but
so it's an interesting card. So we did have Isolate Red in that spot for a long time, and then Ben Dodd actually suggested we switch to Backstab because that was what he was running in Mario. And it is way better at the moment because of how many D-Reacts people run, and so because you've got now that and Command and Conquer, you have so many turns where you can just go, I play Backstab, pump it into CNC, and then I play another CNC, and then I play another Backstab, and your opponent just can't get rid of these D-Reacts from their hand. So that's actually a really viable strategy against a lot of decks, even stuff like Syndra that runs 9 into you. Like you literally can just block out, play a Backstab or play a CNC. They got to start pitching it to their weapon, and then you get an opening, and then you can come back in. So there's actually so many decks right now where it's very good.
Yeah, it kind of like it reminds me a little bit of playing against Dreadbore Riptide. I don't know if you've played that matchup, but like as an assassin that runs a bunch of D-Reacts, which is not this deck, right? Like back when I was running Uzuri or like early iterations of Nu, where Riptide was still kind of in the meta, and they were like on Dreadbore, it was always horrible because you draw like these Sink Belows in hand, and then you just can't do anything with them. You have to leak damage so you can get into Arsenal. And then on their next turn, maybe they have something like released attention, and then you can't even use it from Arsenal. It just gets stuck, and it's annoying. So this is sort of like very similar strategy to that, where you just kind of go flood their hand with D-Reacts, and then their turns just get like exponentially worse because they can't convert their hands. So like you already said, this is also why Command and Conquer is here. I guess, would you say it's more for the first or more for the second line of text, or just like equally both of them?
I mean, they're both very good. Like it's one of the best Codex targets. And then the no D-Reacts is just it just makes them so awkward. It allows you to push through damage against a lot of decks.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, because like I know that because you mentioned Ben Dodd, right? Like I know the Marionette deck that he was brewing with like Tom Battaglia and a couple of others. they cut Command and Conquer at some point because it was just not fitting their pitch curve, and
Yeah,
they couldn't really do
their deck
anything
is
with it.
quite yeah, their deck's quite different. Like their deck's got a lot of less room
Hmm.
in it for us, whereas this deck we don't have much room, but we do have enough to be able to play
Yeah.
CNC and leave no winners. And it ends up being quite a one of the advantages, I guess, of potentially
Mm.
playing this version of the deck than say Mario.
It definitely makes your Codex of Frailty a lot more powerful. Because like in
Yeah,
Mario, like Codex of Frailty is still good because it's a free attack that replaces itself, right? Like that's never a bad thing. But because you're able to run like 3 copies of Leave No Witnesses, 3 copies of Command and Conquer, it just makes your Codex like a lot better because you can immediately threaten
yeah,
that arsenal. So that makes sense. Okay. All right, and then the last one I want to touch on a little bit in the red slot is Infiltrate. And a lot of people go kind of like back and forth on this because in theory it's sort of like Art of Desire Body where it can be a snatch. It just draws you a card when it hits, but it draws you a card from the opponent's deck, and a lot of the times that can be pretty clunky. So, what's been your experience with this? Is this like, okay, if it draws me something good, cool, it's a high roll, and if it draws me something I can't use, at least my opponent can't use it either. Maybe it was a card that's good for them because it's like a synergy piece for their deck, and now they don't get to use it. And if I draw like a sink below or something off the top, it's just super good. What's been your experience with this?
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting card. I actually wanted to cut it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And you can play. The other thing is there's not that many. What are you going to replace it with? I think you still have to
Yeah,
run 27 to 30 stealth cards in the deck,
yeah,
and so yeah, if you're cutting that for a non-stealth card, then I don't think that's right. If you're
yeah.
cutting it for another stealth card because you want to, get a matchup better, like cutting it for isolate or something,
Mm-hmm.
then that's perfectly fine. But yeah, I wouldn't be cutting just a red stealth from the deck. I think
Yeah,
you already run situations where you don't draw a stealth and then you kind of lose the game. So
yeah.
you just don't want to be doing that. In terms of how good it's been for me, I mean, yeah, into stuff like Syndra
Mm-hmm.
and um, what other decks would be good into? But yes, I mean, Syndra's the main one that comes to mind, or any
Mm-hmm.
any deck with red D react. It can be very very useful to find stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like Syndra, it's almost always worth 3 go again because that's what their whole deck does. So
Yeah.
it is matchup dependent. I will side it out in some matchups, but others I
Mm-hmm.
won't. I did some funny stuff like I didn't ever played it, but banishing my Kano opponent's Aether Wildfire, and you can kind of play it the next turn, which is pretty funny. But
Yeah.
and then they don't get it either. But it's just there's always something fun that happens when you
Mm-hmm.
play an Infiltrate. Yeah,
Okay. Right. Makes sense. So it's more of like a. It's not crazy good. It can be good, but it's not super consistent. But there's just nothing really better that you can run in the slot, and that's kind of why
yeah,
it's there, right? Okay. All right. Makes sense. Yeah. Like that was my gut feeling about the card too. Like it can be crazy good, but it's just not consistent. But what else are you gonna run, right? Like you could run, I don't know, Desires of Flesh, I guess, or I suppose you could run like Wither or Sedate, maybe. But this
yeah,
deck already has a lot of arsenal pressure in form of Command and Conquer and Leaving the Witnesses. So Sedate is kind of like a little bit overkill, and then Wither
yeah.
just doesn't really do enough into too many matchups. So okay, I get that. Yeah.
It was
Um,
Wither was maybe the right one when they had like when Cinders were attacking with weapons, but yeah,
mhm. Yeah, like
not
against the red Syndra that just goes, okay, I don't care about ever pitching to these. I just want to flick them in your face. Wither doesn't really do anything. So I would imagine Wither's probably pretty good into other assassins, though. If you
yeah,
needed to like tech that matchup up a little bit, just make their daggers
yeah,
basically non-existent. So um, this is
yeah,
like,
sure,
so you can flex these, right? If you have a couple of local meta choices you
yeah,
need to make, there's definitely options you can take here. Okay, so that takes care of the red stills. Let's quickly touch on the blue ones. We got Bonza Agony. Obviously, this is just, it's a blue that's kind of like cosplaying because this is really a red
yeah,
if you look at the rate on it, if you get it live. So obviously in new, this is easiest to get online in new, right? Just because she has the double reactions both in equipment and also in the form of like hiss and venomous bite. How easy is this to turn online in your experience? Because you basically need like you have flick knives, and that's cool, and you have Snapdragon, so you got 2 onboard reactions that you can use on this. How reliable is it to get Bonds of Agony, like actually to do something?
I mean, it's normally best when you pair it with Take Up the Mantle. So
Hmm.
if you that's kind of the deck combo in some way. One of the deck combos where you flick knives, a hunter's glaive, you take up the mantle, whatever stealth you played into a bonds, and then you play something else. And
Okay.
that's like the best bonds of agony you can play. So you sometimes even just want to block the first bonds of agony just to get it in the graveyard so you can take up the mantle and something later. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes it is a bit awkward. Other times it's just saying it was interesting because there was a period of time where I felt like I wanted to cut it because you're right. Sometimes it is tricky to resolve, but it's just so strong when it does
Yeah.
resolve that you just go for that. So
So
it was
yeah,
on the
like
list.
the high roll, like you can just completely take control of a game if you hit like a key Bonds of Agony and they didn't respect it and they kept like their Blood Rush or whatever, and you just get to take all of their power cards out of the deck. That's like, yeah, you basically win the game on the spot if that happens. Like,
Yeah,
definitely doesn't happen every game, and it happens less and less the better your opponents are, I would imagine.
yeah,
Like, because they just know what this card can do, and they know they have to at least somewhat respect it. But yeah, okay, cool. And
yeah.
then in the sideboard, we got Art of Desire Mind and Persuasive Prognosis. So, I mean, Prognosis makes sense. This is just a really good card in terms of like disruption. And Art of Desire Mind is basically just like Art of Desire Body, just in blue. So, same idea against blue heavy decks. I imagine this comes in. And it sometimes draws you a card, sometimes it does a thing. Why are these
Yeah.
in the sideboard? What's the idea here?
So the like prognosis comes in most of the matchups. So the
Mm-hmm.
one normally you do is you're adding 6 cards to the deck.
Yeah.
So you add a stealth, and then you add either the defensive package or some offensive package. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we did want to do, and we tossed it up, yes or no, but just the nick is in the sideboard as well. And
Yeah.
so the basic idea is when you're facing a blue heavy deck like Enigma or Zen or no, you
Mm-hmm.
sideboard in just the Nick plus Art of Desire Mind along with
Mm-hmm.
Prognosis, and you end up with nine 1 power cards to be able to play just the Nick on.
Mm-hmm.
Take Up the Mantle is kind of pseudo 1 power as well because it finds a Bonds of Agony or something.
Right.
So you end up with about around about 12
Okay.
power cards. So that's kind of the way that works, and because you're only really siding them in against the blue heavy decks, that's
Mm-hmm.
when Art of Desire Mind's at its best anyway.
Okay.
Especially with Just the Nick, drawing 2 cards and gaining 2 life with Go Again because your Slippy is pretty awesome.
Okay. Right. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Like I mentioned, the natural go again on Bonds of Agony is also pretty cool. Like you can just start your turn with a Bonds of Agony holding like 3 or 4 extra cards, and the opponent just goes like, okay, what the hell do I do here? If I
Yeah,
overblock this, they're just gonna go, okay, I have go again. I'm just gonna play the next thing, right? This is like, I mean, anyone that has played new, if you go like Mistblade, they let it hit, and then you play Bonds of Agony, you're in the same
yeah,
position, except you don't have to pitch a card first, and there's nothing they can do to interact with it, right? So
yeah,
it just has go again, and there's nothing they can do about it. So I imagine for
yeah,
like faking out your opponent and just bluffing the bonds, this is a pretty sweet thing to do. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. I mean, sometimes you just full bluff it as well with
Yeah.
3 other stealths in hand and hope that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just block with 3 cards.
Yeah. I think like
You go for it.
normally in new, I don't really like bluffing with bonds of agony because like if they call the bluff and you don't have it, your turn is just awkward. You normally sometimes you're
Yeah,
forced to blow your boots or you're forced to blow a hiss, and you can't turn it on, and then like it's just kind of sad. But I imagine here it's actually a lot better because you have to expend 0 resources to do the fake out,
yeah,
right? Like if they call the bluff, you're like, okay, cool. They called it. I'm just gonna do my follow up, and it's fine. Like I didn't lose anything by doing this. And if they block on it, it's a massive win for you, right? So
yeah.
that's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. So that takes care of all of this stuff here. And then let's talk a little bit about the reaction packages that we have, or the reactions that we have access to. So we've got Razor's Edge. Spike with Blood Rot, Tarantula Toxin, Shred, and take up the mantle. So you got 15 attack reactions in the main board, and then just an Ick, like you just already mentioned, which just comes in when you add in these extra blues, which makes sense. So I think these are kind of self-explanatory. They're just kind of like the best ones you can run. Like Razor's Edge looks a little bit kind of, I don't know, pretty mid, but it's bread and butter, right? It just gets the job done. That's kind of the idea here. I remember,
yeah. It's block 3, and we have so many stealth on the deck. It's just
I remember we used to run this like in Redline Azuri back in the day, and it was just in there because like you didn't really have any better options, and you could sometimes just do the fork where you just go red infect into Razor's Edge for like a 2-card 8, and it's not too bad. And I think here it just has a lot more applications just because you have even more stealth cards, and the stealth cards are better than they were back then. That also helps a lot. Like back then you had like backstab, isolate, and like infect or something. And now you have stuff like Art of Desire Body, Mark of the Black Widow, or like Bonds of Agony, Persuasive Prognosis. So you just have better targets for it, right? That helps. You can use it to push a Kiss of Death over the top, right? So that hits. It's just there's better targets for it these days. Spike with Blood Rot, we already touched on this. Works with Kiss of Death, so it's sort of like copies 4 and 6 of Toxicity in a way, except it's like more flexible because it also works with other cards. I imagine the 1 cost can be a little bit annoying sometimes, and you really mostly want to use Tunic for this, right? This is like the main Tunic payoff in the deck. This, and I imagine like CNC.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you don't. There's a lot of times you just block the Spike with Blood Rot because you don't have a Tunic up.
Yeah.
It's not a card you really want to arsenal.
Yeah.
Because it can be awkward. And I mean, that's the other thing about Razor's Edge. It costs 0 as well, right?
Yeah.
That before.
That's
pretty
one of
big. The important thing about all your X. You want them to cost 0 if you don't run many blues.
Yeah, makes sense. So I imagine also like this is a deck where you often like just sit on Tunic for a while, right? Like you don't spend it immediately. You have it up for like 3 or 4 turns sometimes, and that just happens. So, but this is like that's a common assassin thing, honestly. Like a lot of assassins have this play pattern where you don't utilize your Tunic every turn. It's up. Like you just sometimes sit on it for a couple of turns, and then when you really need it, it's just there, and that's pretty good. But yeah, okay. Tarantula Toxin, probably mostly there because of Kiss of Death, because it's so good with Kiss of Death specifically.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a slightly more spread shred, but yeah, with Kiss of Death, it's way better. It works on all with the spinnerets as well. Like the Chelakera, it's really good on as well because you get both modes on the Chelakera as well.
True.
The Graphene, so that's really good. And then you can still buff weapon daggers as well, which is kind of useful sometimes when you just don't draw a stealth. You can always just pitch for a dagger and then play a Tarantula Toxin on it. It's not great, but it's something. It's better than nothing.
Yep. And you get the mark through that way, and then maybe you can do something with that, and then Yellow Shred, it's just, Shred's been good, into defensive decks ever since this class was printed, basically. Still the same caveat as always, like, be mindful of arsenaling Shred, especially into aggressive decks. Like, in the decks where I used to run Shred, so like Uzuri mostly, this was a sideboard card for me. Because I went like, okay, if I'm playing into aggressive decks, I just don't want to have this in my main board. Because sometimes you ponder into it off of a Codex and you just know they're not going to block, and then you just kind of IP yourself. So have you found this being in the main board, it's good enough to just do the thing because you just pitch it or you block with it into the aggressive decks and it's fine? So it's more of like a play pattern thing where you just have to be like, sort of aware of the game state and then just go like, okay, I can't arsenal this here, it's fine, I'm just not going to do that.
I mean, sometimes you won't arsenal it. You're quite right, it's a bit awkward. It's a little bit different now when you have a higher quality of on hit effects with your stealth now, like Mark of the Black Widow isn't relevant on hit. You got Toxicity to buff something to actually force them to block as well. So there's more ways to kind of clear that now. But I mean, it's just a 0 cost that's got a bit of flexibility, and it blocks 3 important. But yeah, you're right. It can be awkward at times. I think
Yeah.
still needed main board though. I wouldn't want to run less than 15 attack reacts in the deck.
Yeah.
You'll just end up not being able to play out effectively.
Yeah, no, that's that problem. The problem with like stealth cards is they're off. A lot of them are technically above rate, right? But only when they connect. And if they
Yep.
don't connect, they're just like you can just block them with the 3 block. So you need the attack reactions to actually unlock those above rate capacities of your stealth attacks, right? So that makes sense, yeah. And then, yeah, take up the mantle is just, really flexible way. This is basically any assassin can now cosplay as Uzuri, except you don't even need to have the follow up in your hand. It just needs to be in your graveyard. So this is like you can do some really disgusting things with this card. Like I had a game yesterday at my Road to Nationals against a marionette where they started their turn with like some stealth attack. And then by the end of the turn, it was like Bonds of Agony for a 15 because of
Yeah.
Take Up the Mantle. And I was like, okay, sure. Let's go. Let's do this. So you can do some really disgusting things with this for sure. You can, go into Kiss of Death to take care of, like, use Toxicity or something. Can go into Bonds of Agony, like whatever. It's just a 2-piece card, right? Against Enigma,
Yeah.
if you have pick 2 pieces in the graveyard, like any stealth threatens to completely blow up their board with this, so it's just good.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the main board. Oh yeah, and Codex of Frailty, yeah.
Oh, sorry, just on the Enigma one actually though. Sometimes they've got to be marked though because you can't flick your
Yeah,
weapons.
they have to be marked. It's tricky
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah. But like, I mean, into Enigma, if you do manage to get them marked, there's often game states where they stay marked for like a couple of turns just because you don't actually hit them with anything. And then this can be like pretty good. But yeah, like if they're not marked and you have to rely on flick knives, it's tricky. Yeah, then it doesn't work because you don't run any cards that like mark, with no interaction from the opponent. Nothing like, I don't know, public bounty or, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we got like Codex of Frailty, yeah, obviously good card, and you run Leave No Witnesses and Command and Conquer, so it's an even better card because you can threaten that arsenal, and then Leave No Witnesses just makes sense. No surgical extraction, which I think makes sense because I imagine the 2 cost is just pretty awkward for this deck.
Yeah, I mean, we never actually tried surgical, but I don't think it's the right deck for it. You're not running any contract buff cards. It's not like new where you've got like dual purpose hisses and things like that.
Yeah.
That can buff those cards. So yeah, I don't think it's makes the deck.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah. And then Leave No is just generally good. 0 for 4, solid follow up. You can just do like 2-card hand, infect into Leave No Witnesses, 9 value turn, and you get to threaten their arsenal. So pretty good. Potentially like 12 value 2-card hand. Can't complain about that. And also you actually have a couple, like you have Shred that actually works on it, so you even have some reactions that can interact with this, even though I would assume this is more of a niche scenario that doesn't line up too much, but it's there.
It's there sometimes. Yeah, I think the only other one was the Orb Weaver that we didn't touch on.
Oh right, yeah, like Orb Weaver, true, yeah. So it's like a nimblism basically for this deck, except it blocks 3.
Well, it's probably more than that because it makes a dagger. It's actually, and you get to flick it. It's worth 4 damage essentially.
Oh, okay, right.
And the one power weapon shouldn't be underestimated, particularly in the late game, because you can do stuff like block with 3 cards, play a Toxicity, Codex a Kiss, and you can attack with the weapon with the tunic after. So it ends up being like a 2-card, pretty good combo at the end of the game too.
Okay,
so the Chalicara, the Graphene Chalicara should not be underestimated. It's such a good card, and it has go again because we're Slippy. So
because it's stealth, yeah. Okay, so if you're forced to play on like low hand sizes or something, you can always attack with this, and it has go again initially. Like it just costs 1, so you can go Tunic, Chelicera, and then your actual last card or something. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah, for especially I can see that being pretty good in the late game specifically.
Yeah.
So would you say that you normally flick aggressively to sort of make space for the Chelicera, or is it more something where in the late game you probably already flicked and then you just play this card, but you don't necessarily go like, okay, I want to get one of these things as soon as possible. It's more like in the late game, if it lines up, it's very good.
Yeah, I think you normally need to keep the flicks for the mantle.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes Mark of the Black Widow flicking there is fine depending on what you're playing against. But normally you just want to flick, take the mantle
Okay.
when you can, and then you try and just hope you've got one or two left in the deck to
Okay.
make some Graphene Chalicoes later on.
Okay, that makes sense, right? So more of like a targeted opportunity, sort of, yeah. Okay, cool. And then some more cards in the sideboard we haven't touched on. So there's like a defensive package, which is just a single copy of Inertia Trap and Shelter. Two copies of Shelter. So I guess Inertia Trap is just, I mean, it's a good card. But I guess the main reason why this is here is because you can turn into Trapdoor and then you can tutor it. And it's just a bit sad when that happens and you have 0 traps in the deck. So that's I guess.
And Trapdoor can often be the best one as well. Like just blocking 5 off one piece of equipment's pretty good.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
preventing an arsenal.
It's almost like it's a husk basically, right? Sort of.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, and sometimes it's better than a husk because they maybe can't play their last card and you get their arsenal as well.
Yeah,
in which case it's pretty insane when that happens.
It can even do better than that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then Shelter, I guess, is just in the current meta like the best 0 for 4 D-React. Like I if you're trying to build this deck and you're like worried about budget, because like I said, Flick Knives, Hunter's Clave, a lot of these cards are pretty expensive at the moment. I think this could probably be Sink Below, right? And it would be mostly fine. Like
mostly fine. I think you'll lose a bit into Syndra because the prevent is very good there.
Yeah.
You wanna be preventing those daggers a lot of the time and preventing mass triggers. But yeah, I mean it's fine as well. It works well.
Okay. Sounds good. And then we got Pick Up the Point, 2 copies here. Where do these come in? Like, is this for
mostly for Enigma and those longer games where against Guardians as well, where you want to flick your weapons and bring them back to just keep chipping them down. It's just another way to recur daggers in the late game. You can get some marked daggers back, which is pretty nice. But yeah, mostly it's just for games that are going to go the distance.
Okay, right.
And you need to grind people out.
Okay. And you run this over like up sticks because it's easier to convert because you don't want to dagger that often. Because I would imagine like you could also run up sticks and then just go like up sticks into Kiss of Death, but I guess that's a little bit more of a high roll interaction.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, I mean, we felt that the Pick Up the Point was just a more consistent option. But yeah, I mean, we never actually tried any other options there. I mean, we did test for Pain in the Backside for a while, but there's honestly just not that much room in the deck, and we didn't want to add any more 2 blocks. So basically, we settled on Pick Up the Point. We felt it was much better into Enigma and all those kinds of things as well.
Okay, makes sense because you can flick to deny a ward and then just get the dagger back.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And then Poison the Whale, sideboard tech piece against CYB decks. We saw that used on stream too. I think in one of the games it was pretty relevant, and I don't know if it won you the game, but it was definitely good. But
just keeps them honest. If you pitch it early as well, they don't know. Especially early in the tournament.
Yeah, they don't know how many you are on. Okay,
sometimes cool. They can't. They have to try and play around it. So it's quite a And then the other thing is in those matchups you also run Schism, so you can pitch your Poison Well early, show them that you've got them, and then Schism them back, and then they don't even know where it is anymore.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So actually, let's talk about this card for a second here, like Schism of Chaos. Where do you board this in? Like, is this a question of I want more blues, or I play this index where I, on average, have better arsenal targets than my opponent? Where does this come in? Like, what's the idea here?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time you probably. I think most of the times when I've played it, I've not had an arsenal, my opponent's had an arsenal, I've just drawn a card for free off it. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty powerful. It can do the most powerful stuff out of any Fable at the moment, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you get some added value against decks like Mystic decks where they've got like a chi and
Yeah.
force them to arsenal chi or something like that, which is kind of funny. There's all sorts of cool things you can do with Schism of Chaos. I think overall it's pretty good though. We
Mhm.
certainly did some interesting, well, some bad things for me in the tournament, some good things in the tournament. Mostly it was good though, so I definitely
Yeah.
play it.
Keep it. Yeah. Okay. So when you side this in, do you like consciously play around it a lot where you go, okay, I need to try to keep my arsenal open in case I draw into Schism? Or is it more like if
Well,
it happens, if it happens,
if it happens, it happens. The only thing you do need to make sure is that you keep a dagger, because if you don't have a dagger, you can't actually pitch it, which is real awkward. And
Right.
did actually happen to one of my friends in the tournament.
Oh,
Probably
okay.
lost in the game because he got
Oh, damn.
kind of
Yeah.
IP'd basically for 2 rounds because he couldn't get rid of it. So yeah, you do need to keep a dagger.
Okay.
That's probably the main thing.
Makes sense, yeah, because you have like almost no other pitch outlets in the deck except for daggers and
Yeah,
like CNC, and that's kind of it.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I get that, and I think that's everything. Like we already touched on black text a little bit. We covered the rest of the cyber pieces. So, anything you want to add to any of these cards that
yeah.
we haven't touched on?
I don't think so. I think that's kind of
Right,
most of the interactions
right.
there.
It covers it.
I guess there's sort of two ways the deck plays. You either play your Just the Nick and your
Mm,
out of body mines, or you play your defense reactions. It just depends on what you're trying to do in the game. I think
okay.
the other important thing is just that um the the deck really rewards you for playing the right strategy, and there's actually quite lots of different ways you can play the deck because every
Mm,
card blocks for three.
yeah.
You can be quite defensive and particular with the hands you keep,
Hmm.
and actually blocking with the right cards in the right situation can help a lot. So they definitely, if I was gonna say to playing the deck, just make sure you play quite a few reps of it because it's
Hmm.
not like one of those ones where you can kind of say Cinder, right? And you see what it's doing. You can pick it up and play it. There's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of intricate lines and things that you can do with this deck, and it definitely
Yeah.
rewards playing it. I mean, we didn't play it perfectly. We were just lucky when we played it that not many other people had
Yeah.
tested against it. So I think moving forward, people know what it is now. They kind of know what it's doing. So
Yeah. Okay.
putting reps in will be
It
important, I think.
definitely worked for you. You guys had like a 100% conversion rate, I think. All of you made day two. So
Yeah, 100.
pretty good.
Yeah, and I think we all cashed as well, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty solid. Yeah, definitely good record. So, but yeah, I think that's actually I think a pretty important point because like people are gonna see a deck that plays like 40 reds and 3 blues, right? And they're gonna assume, okay, this is like super aggressive, and I have to play like I have to keep every hand. I have to like go full on the gas, like no breaks. And what you just said, like the fact that almost every single card in this deck blocks 3 is really important,
Yeah,
I think. Because like you can just go, you can go off the gas a bit. Like you can play 2 card hands. You can just go like stealth into something else. And do
yeah,
that for a couple of turns and just preserve life until you have like a really good hand that just goes like Toxicity, Kiss of Death, Tarantula Toxin, Codex, Leave No Witnesses or something. And your opponent just goes like, "Oh my god, what's happening here?" And I think that's really important because unlike a lot of like traditional aggro decks, right? Like Viserai, maybe if they're playing aggressive, or like Syndra, or stuff like that, that have to play a lot of 2 blocks to actually make the deck work. Or like I don't know, Azalea comes to mind too, right? Uh,
yeah,
as because like I think this hero, like comparing this to Azalea, actually I think makes a lot of sense because both
yeah,
are kind of aggressive decks that can do disruption, right? Like Arachne goes wide and Azalea goes tall, but they're trying to fundamentally do similar things. But Arachne
yeah,
has the upside in that almost everything still blocks 3, so you can just play defense if you need to. And for Azalea, like she's really not good on defense because like you have no equipment blocks. That's kind of the same here. But you also have like a ton of 2 blocks in your deck, and you just can't
yeah,
really convert to
exactly.
defense pretty well if you have to. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, one thing, just be careful when you play Kiss of Death and Codex, because Codex will clear your chain. It's
Yeah,
going to clear Kiss of Death, so you have to be a
that's
bit
that's
careful with
not
those
gonna
ones.
work. That's true. Yeah. So you don't get the flick value if you do that. That's completely true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So and then let's go over some of the matchups that you've been setting up here. So there's not everything is in here, but I think this covers like the main decks, right, that you could expect at the moment. So you got like Azalea, Syndra, you got Enigma, you got Viserai, you got Zen, you got Nu in there. You got Kale in there. I guess Kale just if you're in your area, Kale definitely qualifies for like his own matchup tab. I think this makes sense. Um, so for anyone who doesn't know who this is Kale McCreath. Like he's a diehard Bravo main from day one. Really, really good player. And yeah, he just plays Bravo. So I guess we can use this as sort of a stand-in for like every really grindy fatigue deck, maybe. So like I don't know, Jarl maybe. Would you say you would also
Yeah,
run the same, like just fat stack, just run everything and just grind them
you
down?
probably can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you might want to like the Enigma one has 65 cards in it as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But you probably might want a few of those. That's just got no D-reacts and there's a bit
Yeah.
less toxicity because toxicity is not as good in some of those Enigmas when they've got calming gesture and stuff like that to
Yeah.
prevent flick, which makes it a lot more awkward. But
Like
yeah,
just have the ward on demand, and then it just can cancel out
yeah.
the flick. Yeah, that's tricky, I would imagine. Yeah. So one thing I want to touch on is like I think the main thing that kind of keeps people off Slippy at the moment, where they go like, I would rather play Marionette or something else, is the fact that the hero ability is symmetrical, right? I think this is a big downside that we have to talk about because like there's no way to go around it. Your matchups against other assassins are gonna be inherently worse than if you played any other assassin just because you give their stuff go again too, right? Like that's something that you can't really
Uh,
work around, but except with
um,
the mask. But how relevant is that actually in your testing?
yeah, I mean it is quite relevant. I think the interesting thing though is say a deck like Nu,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of its stealth cards are blue.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's kind of annoying when they do a bonds or maybe even a prognosis, but if they just come at you with a bonds attraction blue,
Mm-hmm.
like you just don't care because it's
Yeah.
just a blue. So it's kind of yes, it is, but also it's not as like oh yeah, this is just like really bad for me because your
Mm-hmm.
deck's configured as well to take advantage of it. Even a deck like Mario just doesn't have it doesn't it's not configured to be able to take advantage of the inherent go again, and
Mm-hmm.
so you do still. It's not a completely you're just at a disadvantage every time.
Yeah.
You do that they don't have toxicity in their deck, right? Because they
Right.
don't have the ability to use that. You still have toxicity. You can still toxicity kiss them
Yeah.
and flick it and get the win. It's just yeah, it certainly is relevant, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not like a you lose every assassin matchup by 20 points, 80 to 20 or something.
Okay, makes sense, right? So because of the fact that your deck is crafted specifically around having that ability and theirs isn't,
Mm.
the matchup is less bad for you than you might think just because they can't really utilize the
Yeah,
go again every single turn. I mean, I would
yeah.
imagine like especially when you have tempo because they need to block, it's almost irrelevant because like they don't have two stealth cards or they don't have a card and a follow up that they could
Yeah,
utilize. So it gets get a lot less value out of having that natural go again. Okay, and then if
yeah.
you
And
really
you
need
have
it,
to be
like
careful as well.
yeah,
Because if they rely on it and you use the mask and block and it prevents them from getting go again,
yeah,
then
yeah,
then they get a bit blown out sometimes. So if you keep your mask,
yeah. Hmm.
and they have to use Snapdragon scalers at some point in the game,
Yeah.
it makes it very hard for them to kind of just keep a hand um, and rely on it because you can always just brick the whole thing.
Okay, that makes sense, right? And then you already touched on this being probably the best assassin against Enigma, just because of the
Mm.
innate go again. That makes sense to me. And what are some other matchups that you would say are like tricky? You can already see like here down with Zen, it says hard matchup, need to high
Yeah.
roll. So I guess Zen's not
Yeah.
particularly good.
Zen's your hardest matchup by
Okay.
by a long way.
Okay.
The Zen state turns off all your like toxicity flick stuff.
Yeah.
You can get multiple of them out of game. They've got wax on, wax off.
Mm-hmm.
Like wax off just blocking 5 is really awkward. There's so many things that Zen does that are really bad for you. Like it does good damage with the chaser tail turns.
Mm-hmm.
So it is quite hard to win, and that matchup in particular. Really, what you want to do is just try and get the backstab CNC thing going, so they have to burn their wax on and wax off, or pitch them and get rid of them,
Mm-hmm.
and get some space so that you can actually come back and fight them. It is a tough matchup though, and sometimes
Okay.
you just got to get lucky with a toxicity kiss as well in there.
Okay.
Um, though as well is it is still a hard matchup. Like I'm not going to say the fact that our hero power is there makes it easy, but they run D reacts.
Mm-hmm.
They've got disruption. Those are actually just the things that are just bad. Like not good for you as with any deck playing into new.
Yeah.
Again, you still got some game though. You can always toxicity flick someone, so that's kind of the cool thing about the deck, because you've got toxicity kiss to death flick. You always have game into every matchup, because
Right.
you can just high roll that anytime and you win the game.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's
You
cool.
know, there's so much damage that it's and sometimes it's irrelevant what they're doing.
Okay. So you just have the like
Okay.
inbuilt sort of like high roll potential that other
Yeah,
assassins kind of don't have at the moment, I would say. At least not in this form. Obviously, like the newer decks that play around Mark, you can do some pretty disgusting stuff with Mantle. And you can
yeah,
always like you can high roll into like Bonza Agony with like double Justinic or something. Like that's always an option
yeah,
for
yeah,
every assassin deck. But this one has like I mean this one can do the same thing, and then on top of that you also
yeah.
have like the Toxicity Kiss of Death thing. So I guess that makes sense. Yeah, that's cool. How about Viscerai? Because like I would imagine the gut reaction of most people to a deck with like 3 blues in the main board is like, okay, my Viscerai matchup is gonna suck. Like how does that go actually?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting, Viscerai, because sometimes, I mean, when Viscerai does its thing,
Yeah.
it's going to beat you. But you like if they don't draw the Mordred Tide on
Mm-hmm.
on one of their big turns, then your combos actually do a lot more
Mm-hmm.
to them than they do to you, and you have disruption as well. So it's
Right.
not actually too bad, and provided you block very well as well, so you
Mm-hmm.
can actually block all the physical damage to play around getting blown out by, I forget the name of the yellow card that they have that just pops the card from your hand um if you've dealt arcane damage and it does
Yes, succumb
yeah,
to something. I don't know what
compilation.
but succumb. Yeah, that's the one. Like where you don't
Yes,
block their
so
arcane, and then their next attack has like the on hit where they basically do a surgical extraction on your hand,
yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so like because you can actually block reasonably well all their
Mm-hmm.
physical damage, like that ends up being not as good into you.
Mm-hmm.
You still have Codex of Frailty to you just have a lot of powerful stuff that you're doing. And
Yeah.
so yes, I would say if they don't get their really high power turns, then
Mm-hmm.
your high power turns are probably better than them, and you should get there.
Okay.
If you don't draw any high power turns, then maybe their consistency gets there. If they get their good turns, they're gonna beat you, but they're gonna beat anyone if they get
Yeah, I
those
mean, like if
those
they
two.
just roll into like they have I don't know 2 Malefics on the board, and then they just
Yeah,
roll into like a Mordred Tide, I don't know, Revel in Runeblood turn. I don't think any deck can really beat that. Like, that's just like a Viscera high roll. Like there's not much like
yeah.
any deck can do about that. Even new that has like a ton of blues just gets kind of like run over by that. It doesn't really help. So, but you would say like
They don't have
so.
many reacts either.
Hmm?
They don't have too many D-reacts in their deck because they can't really fill them up with too many because it gets a bit awkward for them. So
Yeah,
that also helps you a lot as well.
that does help.
And
That's
if you
true.
go first, like you really want to go first against them because they want to go first. But also sometimes your turn one turns are leak 8 damage and you still
Yeah.
get an arsenal. So it is really it can be really good.
Toxicity, Kiss or Death Flick can do some really disgusting things. Yeah, even if you like start the game with it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so basically against Viscera, you would say like be a little bit defensive on the physical attacks because you can, and then you have like a life buffer for when they do their arcane stuff that you can't really interact with.
Yeah.
And then just hope that you draw one of your powerful combos and they don't get theirs too early, and then it's a pretty winnable matchup, like basically. Okay, makes sense.
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
not necessarily unfavored, it just kind of depends on what the draw sequences look like. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I get that. Okay. Any other matchup that you think we should like touch on specifically?
Syndra is probably
Uh-huh.
the one because Syndra is a really uh, is actually was really tough for us. So we did
Yeah.
it. We practiced that matchup a lot.
Hmm.
And what you actually do have to do in that matchup is actually not just think about only blocking the mask number 2 or number 3
Hmm.
attack, because sometimes what happens is you actually just don't get value out of your block, and they actually maybe just come in with a 3 card turn or a 4 card hand, and you get stuck with
Yeah.
just wanting to come back with something else. So blocking early in the chain is actually very important.
Hmm.
And sometimes, blocking with 3 cards is fine and coming back with a stealth a lot of the time.
Okay.
Particularly the attack reacts are almost at their worst in that matchup because they have
Hmm.
they run 9D reacts into you. There's wax ons,
Hmm.
there's stink belows, there's shelters.
Yeah.
You kind of just can't really afford to take damage, keep these attack reacts, and hope it
Hmm.
comes off. And that the other thing that really helps in the matchup is because they run so many D reacts a lot of the time. Your backstab into
Hmm.
CNC is just so good into them. So you
Okay.
can just roll that back to back and win games
Okay.
because of that. And if they don't run the D reacts into you, you kind of have to work out a little bit, try
Hmm.
and work out how many they've got. If they've only got 3, then yeah, you can keep your attack reacts and just go over the top of them. But
Yeah.
if they've got 9, that's a recipe for disaster. So you do have to like kind of just change your game plan a little bit as the game
Hmm.
goes along to see what they're doing. But I mean, it's not an easy matchup. But once
Hmm.
you played it a few times and you know looked at some understood it a bit more, it becomes a lot easier.
Okay. So basically, kind of check, try to get a feeling for how many D reacts they're on, and if it's a lot, you just kind of like block more with your attack reactions and try to focus around backstab CNC. If they have a low D
Mm.
react count, just keep the attack reactions and use those to like force disruption through, I guess. So that's kind of
Yeah,
like the two main
exactly.
ways you can split that matchup. Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that covers about everything actually. Once again, I tell you to go and watch Jason play this deck in the call in Christchurch. He's been on stream 4 times over the tournament, and they're all really interesting games. And you can learn a lot just from watching him play the deck. I think that's really informative. So I'm gonna link that down below, and you can check that out for yourself. And if you have any questions about the deck at all, like leave them down in the comments below the video, or you can find both of us on the Spiders Web Assassin Discord. I'm also gonna link that in the description of the video. So if you wanna like talk shop and ask a couple questions there, be free to join and check that out. And with that, I think that takes care of everything. That covers everything we wanted to talk about. Do you have any like last pieces of advice for anybody that is maybe looking to pick up this deck and give this a spin?
Oh look, I think just play it a few times before you take it to a tournament. Don't just go on blind and play it. It's not just give it the time it deserves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not I wouldn't call it a pick up and play deck straight away. There's lots of intricate lines to do. And yeah, definitely try and tweak some stuff for your meta as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely a few meta picks that we did, particularly in the stealth cards, like which stealth cards you want to play and don't want to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then just finally want to shout out to my friends Isaac and Koi. It was pretty awesome building this deck together with them over the past couple of weeks before the tournament. And then really awesome that we did really well. So many of the card interactions and choices were just last minute changes by us. Like we weren't
Mm-hmm.
even running just the Nick 2 days before the event. We only added that additional piece of um, attack react with the art of desire
Mm-hmm.
mines in the deck at the last minute. So there's yeah, it was a really team effort and team deck. So yeah, really really cool to have
Cool.
everyone do really well on it, and I was just lucky enough to get top 4.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Sounds cool. All right. Like I said, if you get any questions, leave them down below. And with that, it's time to wrap this up. Jason, thank you again for being here, doing this with me. And everyone out there, have a good time and see you guys in the next one.